Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're awake. All right, good. All right, so my name is Elise Benin. I'm one of the programming partners here at How Design Live. I also host the How Design Live podcast. How many people know about and or listen to the podcast? All right, so we got to promote it better, obviously. You can find it on Apple iTunes. I'm also the owner of marketing-mentor.com, and I'm going to introduce today's speakers. So come on in, come on down, find a seat. So we have three speakers who are going to share the stage. Ben Callahan is president of Dayton, Ohio-based Sparkbox and founder of the Build Right Workshop series. And we asked Ben what he is most proud of. And he said he's most proud of the way every person on his team is constantly learning, and he's most excited about the way the team is growing and changing, but still staying true to their core values of fluency, humility, and empathy. And Ben is joined today by two of his clients at Gap Inc., Nicole Torgersen and Teresa Aguilera. Nicole is Director of User Experience, Customer Experience and Strategy, and she is proud of the culture at Gap, which is, as she says, incredibly talented and diverse and built on mutual respect and collaboration that excels despite how large we are. And Teresa Aguilera is Senior Visual Designer on Gap Inc.'s Experience Design team, and she is most proud to be part of an inclusive working environment at Gap Inc., and in turn fostering a diverse team within the organization. So please join me in welcoming Ben, Nicole, and Teresa to the How Design Live stage.
I know that it's totally cheating for me to start my presentation with a picture of my adorable son, but I promise that this is relevant to the conversation. So this is my son when he was, I would say, about 7 years old. And in this photo, the two of us are sprawled on his bedroom floor, and we are in the process of building this, which is the Lego Millennium Falcon. And my son is, like his father, a little bit obsessed with Legos. He has done a really good job of convincing all of his friends and cousins and uncles and grandparents and even his parents that anytime there's an opportunity to buy a gift for him, it should probably contain some Legos. And so every once in a while, you know, he gets a larger kit. Every once in a while, somebody buys him one that has over 1,000 pieces. And when that happens, he usually recruits me to kind of come in, hit the floor, and start to do the work with him. And usually when we're doing that, it's because he's reached a point in the process where it's kind of like this. So this is page 128 and 129 from the official Lego instructions for this specific ship. And if you can see on the far right side at the top, there's this little flap that kind of sticks up on the back of the Millennium Falcon, right? There's actually 13 of these things in this specific kit, and they fold up like this so that you can kind of get inside the ship and play around, or you can kind of fold them all down and it creates a nice top to the ship. And the challenge here is that he gets a little bit bored building the same thing over and over again. And so he says, hey, Dad, there's a whole bunch of these. Will you come in and kind of help? And so we build a little assembly line. And that process generally kind of looks a little bit like this, right? Open up those bags and dump them all out. We kind of do some organization, some categorization. We're looking for similarities. Maybe it's size, maybe it's color, shape, some way to kind of group these. And then we kind of work through building out the components that we need. And, we're able to take these components, we're able to kind of attach them to the ship, and we're presented kind of with that final product. And today, we want to share a little bit about how the work that we do in terms of digital design on the web is not so different from the process that my son and I go through when we build one of these larger Lego kits. Today is really a story about systems. And I actually want to take it back to 2012, 2013 or so when at my organization, at Sparkbox, we noticed a big trend that a lot of our clients were starting to build their own teams to do the exact same work that we did. And we're a software, web software, web product kind of company. And so we saw this trend, and we noticed that these organizations were finally having the realization that no matter what industry they were in, they were a software company. And I think all of us, if we stop and think about it, right, all of us have custom software that really drives the business that we work in a lot of ways. For Gap, it's e-commerce, but for you, it may be an application process or something else. But this idea that software is core to what we do means that we have to start thinking a little bit more modularly. And Gap, when we met, was way ahead of the curve on this. They already had a big internal team of designers, developers, UXers, researchers doing really good work. And we began working together just as they were planning for a responsive redesign of their product detail page. And really, we were kind of there just to be just to provide a kind of an outside perspective to the process that they were hoping to use. Eventually, we did get a chance to work together on that project, and that work is now in production for all of their brands, and it's actually continued through the rest of the buying process for them as well. But our default approach to this kind of large-scale work is always very modular. As software engineers, we're trying to break these problems down, and we don't want to write the same code twice. We're actually a little bit lazy, and so we're looking for ways to kind of be more efficient in the development process. And so the default approach that we took with this was very modular, and that actually is a really good starting point for what has now become Stitch, which is Gap's multi-brand design system. And so I want to make sure that Nicole and Teresa have lots of time to talk through the details of that process. But before that, I want to jump into quickly just explaining, to make sure that we're all on the same page, what a design system really is. And lucky for me, you folks have been thinking about design systems for a long time, right? If I were to come to you and say, hey, I own this large building, and I got this problem, people keep getting lost in my building. Can you make for me a sign to solve this problem? You would probably laugh at me. You'd say, ha, 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 silly client, you don't need a sign. You need a wayfinding system, right? We need to think about this in a more holistic way. And the same is true if I came to you and said, my logo's feeling a little outdated. Could you make for me or design for me a new logo? You would say, I absolutely can, but you're going to need a lot more than just a logo. You're going to need all the assets that surround it. And in fact, you would probably do a beautiful job with that logo, but you would also say, here's how you can use it, right? Here's how you can't. And so I think our industry's done a really good job of thinking systematically about design for a long time. And a lot of these truths kind of adhere as well when we transition into digital. And so design systems, as it relates to how we're talking about them today, really are very similar, but they include a living code base of front-end components. And these components can be assembled, just like Legos can, right, to construct an entire digital experience. And they address everything from color to typography, from grids to navigation, to documentation and usage guides, and even guiding principles and design patterns that you hope your team will adhere to. They promote the reuse of code and patterns. They make the web more consistent, more efficient, more accessible, and, believe it or not, more creative. I want to make sure that I share with you that we believe so strongly in this idea, this design systems approach, that almost every project that we take on now at Sparkbox involves a design system of some kind as a core deliverable. And we're doing research on this topic. I'll share a little bit more about that towards the end of our presentation. But we're also offering workshops and trainings because these are so critical to the long-term success of a digital project. But they also don't maintain themselves. So I want to make sure Nicole has some time here to jump in to talk a little bit about Gap's story with design systems.
Thanks, Ben.
Sure.
So first I'd like to tell you a little bit about Gap as a company. So Gap is an umbrella company. We have 5 brands within our portfolio. 2017 is a really great year for us. We have about $15.9 billion of sales, 3.2 of which are online. We have about 832 million annual unique visits, and about 50% of our conversion is from mobile. That's the average in the industry is about 30%. In addition, 2017 Cyber Monday, we were rated the 3rd highest conversion in retail. We are based in beautiful San Francisco. This is actually a view from Teresa's office. Lucky Teresa. And a little bit about our culture. So we've been embracing a new way of working over the past year and a half. We're embracing a test and learn culture. So we value quite a bit quickly testing, failing fast, failing often, and just learning as fast as we can. Gone are the days where we would take a year, 2 years, 3 years to develop a product and then like launch it and like really hope it goes well. We're also shifting to omni-channel experiences. I'm sure some of you in retail might have heard about this, but we have physical store locations and we have an online digital presence. Our customers need to be served across all touch points. We are working really hard to sort of blur the lines between those touch points so we can meet our customer anywhere that they are. So that means that within the user experience team, we have a lot of work ahead of us to understand how can we best understand those touch points and what our customers need at those touch points and serve them there. In addition, we've got an amazing culture at Gap. And so all of these things are really important because of the work that we need to accomplish within Design System. Within Gap, we have an incredible amount of respect for one another. We have diversity and inclusion. We're known for our diversity and inclusion, and we have about 70% of the employee base at Gap are women and women leaders. Okay, so on to the Design System. So I'd like to tell you a story about collaboration. In 2013, I was invited to join the UX team at Gap. At that time, we had an e-commerce experience that had 4 brands on one platform. Our UX team was centralized to support all of those brands. We still are. We're expanding every day. And there were 2 designers in-house, an interaction designer, a director of user experience, and then we had 2 designers from a small local agency. And at the time, so when I was asked to join the team, I was the first designer on the team with graphic design and front-end coding background. So at this time, we have 2 experiences. We still do, marketing and transactional. So if we think transactional, we think the category listing page, product page, shopping bag, cart, all that. Marketing would be the homepage and any of the marketing stories throughout our experience. So we had a handful of teams who are responsible for the design, development, maintenance, and caring of that digital experience. User experience is placed right in the center. We're partners to everyone. We had 4 brands, and within each one of these brands' teams, we work most closely with marketing, production, and design, creative services teams. Those are just a few of the many, many teams that keep these brands running. We have 2 development teams. We have a front-end content development team that works closely with the brands to create the content for the marketing stories throughout our experience. And then we have an engineering organization, which is responsible for the framework and architecture of our e-commerce experience. And then we have product management. We partner really closely with product management to understand what initiatives we should be executing and what priority against our long-range plan that our organization has identified throughout the year. So 2013, this is what our sites look like. All of our sites were laid on top of the same technical framework. So they essentially carry the same layout, page to page, just one of our product pages. And what you'll probably notice is with each one of these pages, what differentiates the brands is likely the logo, the product photography, and maybe a button, a color override here and there. Essentially, they look the same. What's missing here is the brand voice. We could do a better job here, right? Juxtapose this to our in-store experiences. Our company has been around since 1969. We've had years to fine-tune this experience. Our customers walk in and they are completely immersed in our brands. And each brand has a unique voice. So my question is, how might we take the strong brand presence from our physical stores and bring that across into our digital experience? The answer was to unify all of these teams, which at that time were sort of working in silos. We didn't have mechanisms to collaborate together to make sure we had a cohesive experience for our customer, not for lack of trying, it just didn't exist yet. So what I introduced was a design system. And a design system would help our company be unified around a shared language between UX, brands, brand creative teams, marketing, front-end development, product management, shared design strategy, and shared code. So once I identified this need as a relative newbie to the company, I kind of set out on the campaign path, as it were, and I started to gather some information that I could use to then help my partners across the organization understand what is the vision I have and why should they care about it. So I looked at one page, just product detail page for Gap brand, and I did my own analysis. So I counted up how many different font styles we have and how many different colors we're using, and I looked at the brand style guide for the Gap brand, and I came up with 8 different font styles, 13 different colors. The font styles, granted, we're not leveraging the font as identified in the Gap brand style guide. The colors, I think there were maybe 2, 3 that were actually present in the brand style guide. So again, there's opportunity to do better. This is a little bit of a scrape of what I found. Lots of colors, lots of different blue colors. Some of them weren't quite even the same hue. Many grays, we don't need that many grays. Lots of duplication and sort of, as one would say, a little bit of code bloat happening in our front-end styles. And as you might notice, these are web fonts, not awesome brand expressive web fonts, but like Arial had like a sans serif. I'm sure Gap didn't want this to represent their brand. So I took broad strokes to paint a picture of what might this look like. I'm not trying to solve the design problem here. I'm just trying to map to an experience that I think might represent Gap brand. What I would do in the future is I would take this to my partners, like my new creative director friends in the brands, and say, all right, I've started here. Let's work on this to fine-tune this and get this more in alignment. And then from there, I extracted what I believe would be the components in a design system specific to Gap brand. And again, this is not trying to solve the problems. I'm just creating the framework, and I'm just creating some material that I can bring to my partners and say, you own this. You own this content. I'm just creating a framework for you. So help me fill this in so it represents your brand accurately. Then I moved on to buttons. This looks fun, doesn't it? I'm sure it was a lot of fun to create. Lots of creative energy went into this over the years. Lots of variation here. We have buttons with square corners, with round corners, with big text, with small text, with all caps, with title case, some that even have little squiggly emotion things saying shop now. So this is a relatively easy sort of component to dig into. It's slim pickings sort of. It's really, really easy to create a system out of. So the other thing that you'll notice here is that, you might not notice this, but small fact, all of the text in every one of these buttons is rendered as an image. That is not easy to update. And if you need to translate these into multiple languages, guess what? You're creating one image for every single one of these buttons. So multiply this times 6, at least. And then when we need to update it, that's finding every single image asset throughout our experience and manually updating it. Some poor designer had to do that work. Page load, these are images. They load at least 5 to 10 times larger on a page than an HTML asset would. And they're not very friendly for our customers that need ADA accessibility. Unless we add an alt tag on, it's still extra work. We could get more bang for our buck. So again, I wasn't trying to actually solve the problem. I was just creating the framework and painting the picture of what if we were to switch to HTML buttons? What if we were to unify the forms? Pull in some web fonts, create some consistency with regard to how we're using our type. The next thing I did was I started to interview partners throughout the organization. So I met with some of the partners who have teams that code the front end, that create the front end code. And what I learned was that we have 30 plus style sheets What I understood was that 31 is the maximum that Google will allow you to have before they start dinging you on SEO rankings. So that's the reason why they only had 31. They also had many JavaScript files loading into their page. And so this is not I don't make decisions here, but I can identify opportunities to marry our front-end code with our design strategy. And so I saw some opportunity here, and I started saying, well, what if we were to create a system where maybe we don't create CSS and JavaScript, and we don't create our front-end code around individual products or features as we add them. We create styles that are available at a global level in one place that's easy for everyone who codes and everyone designs to understand where it is. And then once it's available in that one place, the people who are coding will have more trust that they understand, well, one, this has been coded properly, it matches with the brand style guides, it's sort of pre-blessed by our brands, and it could just be easier for our entire organization to be a little bit more organized. Okay, so now I take all of the sort of research I did on my own and start to make a case. So I need to put together some material to help my partners understand what's a design system. People within the organization, this was a very new concept. So I went back to a similar analogy to Ben's, and Brad Foss does a really amazing job of talking about sort of atomic design as well. And there's this analogy that works really well, which is Legos. So if we were to move to a system whereby we have these sort of little pieces of code that have design infused within them and have them available sort of in a box and ready for us to take out at any point in time when we need to create an experience, that will make it much easier for our organization to, say, prototype earlier. We can test and learn much earlier. It will save us time in the development life cycle. If a developer doesn't have to sit down and say, okay, blank canvas, I'm just going to start writing some code. I'm going to put it up in this style sheet, and I'm going to create this JavaScript, and I'll put it there for the product. They will be able to save time by just pulling down some pre-composed front-end code. And then they can spend their creative energy on building and exploring completely new products. They don't need to spend it on the knowns. Same thing with design. Designers have, our design team, Teresa might tell you a bit about this, but we have templates. Our design team can go into our box folder and they can pull down the sketch template for Gap, and they have all the buttons, all the files, all the fonts, they have the accordions, they have all the components they need to just shift them into place and create their product. This also happens to help me, selfishly, as creative director. As I grew my team, I knew I could give my team the tools they needed to confidently make their design decisions. I really needed that consistency built in as I grew the team. From a financial perspective, time equals money, right? So my theory at this time was if we were able to create a system such that our developers and our designers had reusable pieces they could start with, we could shave off 50 to 80% of their time. That translated into money. Teresa will tell you a little bit more about how that worked out later. The other benefit is brand. So this one is a little bit more difficult to quantify within probably any organization, but back to what I observed where I looked at our digital experience online, our in-store experience, we have touch points that weren't cohesive. If we build more cohesiveness with how our brands are represented at all touch points, our customers will have more trust in our brand. More trust in our brand creates a more loyal customer. All of these points went over really well with our partners. Where can it be applied? So I found that I found myself sort of repeating this throughout the organization depending on who I was speaking with. The initial inclination was to expect that this system could only be used in the more transactional pieces like a product page or category page or a shopping cart. And that's just not true. In fact, there is a need for us to bring a little bit more cohesiveness and consistency between these really amazing marketing stories that our brand partners were putting forward on our digital experience and the transactional, I want to buy the product. You convinced me to buy the product, now I want to buy the product. We have two different teams that are responsible for those experiences, and sometimes that was a little bit more apparent. So we can actually apply this design system, and we have, throughout our entire digital experience. We could also extend that to our in-store experiences. Okay, so next thing I did was I started to establish the strategy. The first step in creating a design system is our team, so the team who's originating the design system, UX, we really needed to get firm on what is our strategy. We needed to start putting one foot in front of the other, starting to create some simple patterns. So we started off with things like typography and buttons, and then once we started going, we started to identify there's a pattern there, there's a pattern there, there's a pattern there. And it's really interesting what happens when a design team starts to understand they can make patterns out of everything. It's like all of a sudden, all you see is patterns. And there's this amazing energy that goes with identifying those patterns. And something that I realized that we need to do is just say, okay, just hold the bus. Capture all these, put them in a spreadsheet, prioritize them, focus on one at a time. Because we started to work on a few at a time, and then we'd never get anything ready to develop. We'd never get anything out the door. So really important point for anyone considering doing a design system of their own is just start slow. You would be amazed with the amount of work that goes into just figuring out your type system. The next thing that we did, make sure I don't miss any points here. Yep, I covered them all. Was we established a point of no return. So we identified at what point, just starting with design, we haven't even developed anything yet, just starting with design, where's the point of no return where the design team starts delivering their executable files, delivering their materials to sort of force a change within our organization. So we would say we were starting on design for our product detail page, we would design the entire product detail page, and then when we went to spec that detail page, we would break it down into componentized pieces and say, okay, I'm going to take this accordion, and I'm going to bring that over to a new file, and I'm going to do all the specs for that there. I'm going to call this the accordion pattern detail specs. So when we went to work with our partners who were in charge of implementing, product managers and developers, who would say, okay, we need to create a whole separate story for that one component. And we need to build a component first, and we need to make sure that our coders understand that we're asking them to think differently about how they're building this one piece. And then they need to contribute that one piece to one code repository that's in one place. And so that will kick off an entirely different conversation within our development organization on how they create that code repository, how they formulate their code, and how their teams work together to understand what's in there and how they can extend it. And then once we create the accordion, then we'll go back to creating the page, the shell itself. So we established a point of no return. At what project will we start creating designs this way? At what point will we then start to talk with our partners about making this real? The next thing that we did was we had to find partners who had skin in the game, partners who were starting a new initiative or maybe a large enough feature where we could say, hey, we want to try this new thing. Are you interested in figuring out a different way to implement our digital experience? Let's work on a strategy together. That worked really well. So 2014, that exact opportunity came to myself and my team, and it was huge. So our organization decided that they were ready to do a complete overhaul of our e-commerce experience, looking at the design and the front end, and they were ready to create a responsive experience, which was an even more amazing opportunity because then not only are we creating components, we're creating components that are responsive. So it's 3 to 4 times more thinking. And so this is the point at which Ben's team at Sparkbox joined us to help work on the front-end development strategy. And then Teresa joined the company to help lead the amazing design system team. So I'll let Teresa talk about what happened from there on.
Thanks, Nicole. Yes. So ultimately, we knew, based on the work that Nicole had done, we had a really big vision for this design system, and we knew ultimately we wanted the whole organization of Gap Inc. invested. But we wanted to start small to prove it out, and so we decided to do something that I would recommend, which is start with what you know. we started with what we could control, which in this case was a cheat sheet style guide. So in the process of doing all of that responsive redesign work, there were some really great simplified designs coming out of the UX team. And I worked with those designers to extract from them components and styles and all of that. So it's coming from design, you don't do the components first. I want to be clear. You'll end up painting yourself into a corner that way. So definitely still start with the design, which is what we did, and then extracted that out into these style guides. How many people have done a thing like this? Had a style guide? Great. So you're familiar with these. They are great. They're kind of a no-brainer. And then this happens. Every day you're answering this question. Which one is it? Is it final? Is it V14 final? And then you're spending hours and hours and hours keeping this up to date, and you're not doing your design work that's actually innovative. So if you felt this pain, how many have felt the pain? Raise them high, yeah. If you felt this pain, you might be ready for something more dynamic and living, which is what we had identified. To keep up with the fast-paced digital products and distributed teams that we have today in these organizations, you really need something that can stand up to that challenge. And we thought, if we control this design asset, this style guide, and we're frustrated with its use, I wonder what our partners are feeling. So we asked. And we got our answer. They don't trust those either. Developers, at least our developers, really just don't trust what they find in a static document. That's not the world that they live in. They live in a living code world. And so we decided that we had to find out what it was about it that they didn't trust. Is it coming because it's coming from UX? Is it the static form? What is it? And so we started this lean process of discovery, basically, where we took an assumption. If we're annoyed, so are they. And we validated that assumption by going to ask those partners face-to-face what the problem is. And we came away with the exact same problems and some new ones that really helped direct us. We found that these static style guides left people second-guessing. They had low confidence in the design deliverables, in their accuracy. They actually were uncertain about who to ask to find out what the right answers were. And that revealed an organization-wide struggle that we named tribal knowledge. This is really, really difficult in a company our size. I'm sure it's true at companies that are smaller as well. But basically, there's just confusing jargon. There's a lack of a shared language. Different teams are using different words when they mean the same thing, or the same word when they mean something totally different. And that all contributes to an overall lack of trust in each other's teams and in the deliverables that are helping you all work together to make the product. So we latched onto this design system team as a guiding North Star problem to solve. Sure, we're looking to create a design system, which ultimately is a tool, a product, eventually, hopefully. But we wanted a guiding principle, and we found it in this. We had to make the design system trustworthy and credible, and over the next 10 months, every sprint and every exercise we undertook was rooted in this fundamental driving principle that we had to be a single source of truth. So that one simple path of inquiry uncovered all that for us, and we felt that was a really great way to start building trust as well as to bring our stakeholders, the people who would be using this, the UX, the product managers, the developers, bring them into the fold and have them tell us what the design system should be. So we adopted what you might recognize as a lean cycle of learning. Has anyone heard of the lean approach these days? It's very popular. With good reason. It's very good for certain things, and it was great for this because we were just in a discovery phase. So we wanted to form some hypotheses that could be tested, and then validate those assumptions and feed the learnings back into a cycle. And we actually did this for we did this sprint cycle, one a week. So we did it very rapidly. We'd start on a Monday and have our hypothesis we'd write up, our assumption, we'd write up a hypothesis, figure out some way we could test that hypothesis by Thursday, retro on it on Friday, and then by Monday we'd be starting all over again. So I'm going to show you a little bit of what that looked like for us. I want to note we were a dedicated cross-functional team at this point, which is great and is sometimes a luxury. But in this cross-functional team, everyone participates. So developers are sketching, Developers come and help us conduct the interviews. There's no siloing, and that way everyone's ideas are at the table and everyone is able to push this idea forward. We even have a lot of remote folks because we're working with Sparkbox in Ohio and we're in San Francisco, so we use all kinds of wacky online tools to make this happen. But it's great, very messy, and lots of fun. So I want to point out that the toolkit site of the design system is what we focused a lot on in this process because we ultimately knew eventually we wanted a full product, but at the same time, the toolkit site, this website that would be accessible internally, is where all of the different folks with different levels of expertise would be coming to get their information. And it had to be accessible to all levels of understanding and scannable, because when someone's coming to a design system site, they are looking for something. It's the time of need, and we need to make sure that the site is going to solve their need. So sometimes we would test a prototype. That's what you're looking at here. This is an actual prototype of an early version of our design system toolkit site. We try to simulate a real task because it's that time of need. We want to make sure it's as realistic as possible. But sometimes we just needed to validate a concept. And in those cases, we would go back to card sorts, things like that. In this case, at a company our size, we actually had to validate the system was even wanted and what people meant when they said design system. So these are the must-haves from our front-end designers or developers who work on the marketing team, and then same exercise with the engineers who work on the transactional team. I won't map it out, but there's a lot of differences. And this was important for us to come to grips with and start to address. So throughout all of this, we had a spoken goal that was learning. And then throughout all of this, I also want to point out we had an unspoken goal, which was building this trust by listening to our partners. They felt validated just by being brought into the process. And in other cases, the things we were testing, we realized the UI was actually distracting. We had a couple where we had to rerun the experiment with a different format because we discovered people were giving us feedback on things we didn't want, like the logo color or the what have you. And so we went back to paper in some cases. This is an exercise in naming conventions, figuring out the hierarchy of the site. And because we were on this one-week cycle, it really made us work quickly. We couldn't focus on all the details and get all caught up in all of this. We were just learning. So we did that for about 15 weeks. And by that point, went through an entire series of prototypes for the toolkit site. Tested all the content, all the documentation and the interface, and then a design system started to take shape, and a design system voice started to emerge. And that's how we came up with Stitch. We actually went through an entire process to name the system itself, and I probably don't have to tell this group that how powerful branding can be for a product. It's no different for a design system. The minute we gave it a name and we started all referring to it the same way, it had a huge impact. We got stickers made, swag, everyone loved it. It's fully ingrained now, and I think that the branding did a lot for that. And along the way, the brand voice started to back up this idea of trust. So where are we today, a year and a half after our beta release and 5 years after Nicole had this idea? We have a software product. This is a video of our site. It's a proprietary software product built in-house. It's got a release schedule of its own. It also has a lot of, I won't get into all the technical details of what's behind this, but in terms of the UI, we represent typography and color, and there are tools in here to let you quickly copy and paste the code snippets you need. We have base components like those buttons that Nicole was talking about. We even have expanded into some JavaScript components like float element, form field elements. And also foundational things like your grid, your spacing system. And we even are starting to get into guidelines, things around accessibility. And I will note everything we put into Stitch, it takes probably twice as long to build it because we test it across browsers. We make sure it's accessible and it has all of the instructions, the documentation about how to maintain that accessibility when you implement it. It's not a small amount of work, but it's totally worth it because it's a proven success. It really did give us 50 to 80% time savings for both designers and developers. Everything from speccing designs to prototyping new features goes so much faster. And is actually, it's institutionalized, and if Stitch went away, people tell us that they would now have to recreate it within their own systems. And that actually translates to what we've calculated to be a 300% return on investment. Every dollar we put into Stitch, which really is mostly around labor, around the cost of people building the thing, we save $3 for the company in terms of time and energy and performance on the site. And that's year over year. And then again, it's 100% on brand. All of this work with the brands has been done up front. The good design system is invisible to our customers outside of reinforcing brand equity. They don't know the difference that it's a design system. Maybe, hopefully, they can feel it because they feel it's consistent. But it actually enables innovation and evolution since we can update the brands more easily. We've already updated the sites, the fonts on 3 of our brands' sites in less than a week when it would have taken months before. So that's the product. But the real win, I want to bring it back, is the gathering together of people. All these people that were working separately and siloed are now unified under a single vision, guided by the same North Star. It's institutionalized. Stitch is a trusted method, a tool set. This is just how we do things now, and we definitely hear that people trust each other more. And this is how things went for us at Gap, and I acknowledge that that might not be the exact same. Every design system is going to be unique because you're solving pain points in your own company. But there are some things I think that are shared across all design systems, and I'm going to hand it back to Ben to tell you more about those industry trends.
Thank you. So as I mentioned at the beginning, we have been conducting some research around design systems in the industry, and I wanted to call out just a few things that I think really aligned with the story that we heard from Gap in their process. And one of the questions that we asked, we had over 400 respondents on a survey we recently did. One of the questions that we asked was, how successful is your system? How do you feel about it? You know, is it working for you? And of the folks that we kind of heard back from that things were working well, we were able to draw some interesting conclusions. We found that successful design systems are almost always very robust. They include a lot of different things. They've got the type and the color and the spacing, like Teresa shared, but they also have voice and tone. They have instructions. They have accessibility language to help you understand how to actually implement these things. They have code snippets for you to use. They tended to be much more robust than the sites from folks who are feeling like they're not that successful. This is another big deal. A large majority of the folks who felt that their design systems were successful they said that they were very well maintained. And we can talk a little bit more about what that means, but the opposite of that was also very evident in the results, which is that if you're depending on a tool to maintain the system for you, it's likely that you're not going to feel that great about it because these tools really they're not really doing the work that needs to be done. And so what we saw was that a dedicated team of folks from a lot of different expertise have to be involved in this. Or there has to be ownership spread around the organization. That's something that we saw pretty clearly. And that kind of leads to the last point that I really want to share, which is that a successful design system really is a unifying tool for your organization. If you listen to the story that we just heard, this started 5 years before that first release. And so, if you think about that, 4 years of legwork, pounding the pavement to really kind of prepare the soil for these seeds to grow, and that's kind of what it takes. This is not a technology problem, this is a people problem, and these systems really do have the ability to bring your team together, to put them on the same team, to have that trust established, that North Star. And so we're really excited about the work. We are really excited to release this website actually today, which is the results, the high-level results from some of the research we've been doing. If you're interested in design systems, you want to learn more about it, this would be a really good resource. If you want to convince the folks at your office that this might be something you should consider, this would also be good to send them to. There's a lot of information around workshops and training and that kind of thing. And so we'd love to have you check this out. And with that, I really, on behalf of Gap and Sparkbox, just want to say thank you so much for being here. It's an honor to have your attention. We're happy to continue the conversation. You can reach us on Twitter here, and we will actually congregate just outside the ballroom after our time is over if folks want to talk in more detail, because we'd love to have those conversations, okay? Thank you so much.
Thank you.